Okay, thank you, and good afternoon, and welcome to the second in a series of Xceed Smart Data webinars that we're running. So thank you for joining the session, and today we're going to be looking at how to address common business challenges using some smart data thinking, specifically focused on the insurance sector. So a quick background to Xceed for those who aren't familiar with the company. So Xceed was formed in 2003. It's a fast-growing IT professional services firm, headquartered in London, but also with offices in Edinburgh and New York. Our industry focus is really around financial services, but we do work across other sectors as well, such as telecoms, media, energy. But really our core skills around the pure technology, around IT infrastructure, application integration, data and enterprise architecture. We do a lot of work across large business change programs, and we have a strong project and program management skill set underpinning our services. So before we dive into the detail, a quick bit of housekeeping. So we will be recording this session today, and we will be sending out a link to it following the webinar. If you do have any questions, as we'll be hosting a Q&A session at the end, please do enter those into the chat box, and we'll pick those up as we go through. And in terms of if you have any technical issues, then please do send an email to the IT support at xceedgroup.com email address, and we will help you with any challenges you're having. So in terms of an introduction to your speakers today, so I'm McDaniel. I'm a Senior Managing Consultant at Xceed. I have over 10 years experience within consulting within the financial services sector, both from my time at Xceed and also prior to that at Deloitte Consulting. My specialisms are really within enterprise and data architecture within the financial services sector. So what I'll do is just pass quickly over to Paul to give an introduction.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. My name is Paul Coffey. I've been working at the enterprise data architect level within various organizations and industries over the last few years, and I've been having as much fun as I can with describing the regulator wants and what the common sense of it all is.
Okay, perfect, thanks. So just move on to the next slide, and Paul is just going to take us through a bit about the big data hype and looking beyond all of the hype that's in the industry around that at the moment.
Okay, thanks, Graham. Yeah, so the first thing I want to address here is what would be the driver for the work that's taken at the moment within the insurance industry. We have Solvency II. In the banking industry, we've got BCBS 239. But when you look closely at these, the principles and regulations that are being applied, quite often what we would see from an architecture point of view is just lots of common sense. So the propositions that we're going to talk about here later on today are more about how we can do something that's pragmatic to help us with them. We also want to talk around a little bit about the concept of what big data is. It's quite a confusing term. I don't think people are trying to sell big data technology are explaining it particularly well. Also looking from the idea of big data into what we would like to call a smart solution. And then we'll have a look at a typical customer journey through an insurance life cycle and show some of the areas where we identify where big data can help or smart data can help. And then towards the end we'll cover off some key points and we'll also get ourselves ready for a Q&A session. One of the things I have to say, though, is that what I've found over the years is that the next quote is one that does help understand what the particular problems are at the moment. So one of my favorites is from Albert Einstein, and he says, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them." And when we're going to do the data thing a bit better, whether it's driven by the regulator or whether it's a business strategy, we have to recognise that the way that things were done in the past have not been particularly efficient, and they have helped to create what we'd say is an inefficient landscape for data with many problems within the organisation. But before we can start to think about that, what we like to do is try and go visual very quickly when we're talking about data. So what we've got on the screen here is just a very, very simple conceptual model, which is something that we use to try and frame and scope the challenges for data within an organization. But a couple of concepts that are really close to at the moment are understanding the difference between the breadth of data and also the depth of data, because this helps us to understand what we're talking about when we talk about big data and small data. So if I was going to characterize small data for you now, it would be the data that you currently use within your organization. And we have to use this definition because in the industry we have a thing called big data, and big data is basically expanding the breadth of the data that you use and not the depth. So by understanding the subtle differences between the two, and probably the very important differences between the two, we can understand how big data can actually help us. And if we've got that understanding, we start to move towards the kind of concept of smart data, the smart data thinking. Okay, now there are a couple of views that we need to understand also within an organization. One is what is your small data landscape at the moment, and there's two main parts to this group that we've discovered in the work that we've done. One is the IT systems landscape. These are the applications that are built, support, and developed by the IT internal department, even if it's outsourced. But then we also have this much larger landscape, which is the EUC landscape, the end user computing. It's lots of spreadsheets and databases that are sitting on users' machines, but which from our point of view in the data world are still as important, because there's very, very important reasons why they're there. I think one thing that we have discovered through our work there recently is that the EUC landscape, as we call it, is much bigger than anybody really appreciates, and it's not until you get a full view of that before you can start to understand what the challenge is. Okay, so some of the common features here. The data exists. It often starts its life. Much of it starts its life in the IT systems. From a referential point of view, some of it will start its life in spreadsheets, which are owned and controlled by the business. This EUC landscape is very, very opaque. It's very difficult to get a handle on it. It's something we've discovered over the last few years. It's getting the understanding of the size of the landscape, but also, as we worked out with one of our partners, is being able to very quickly get a view of what that actual landscape is, to draw up a big, scary picture. And of course, it's very important here to understand that data is used and created and managed and processed by the business. So this is not an IT thing. You have to involve your business community, and this helps when you start to move the elements of the data governance that we like to sort of talk about as well. And also, I think we just need to make the point that you cannot govern or control something which you don't know about. Okay, and IT have got no chance of being able to govern the EUC application. And some of the benefits we've got is that the solid foundations and robust management and governance of this landscape means that you have a better understanding of the landscape that your organization uses. And therefore, you're able to actually sort of think about how you could implement big data technology, smart data technology, rather than just going off and buying something and hoping everything's going to be okay. If you know what the landscape is, you can have control of the landscape. We know from personal experiences we've had that being able to draw up this picture actually gives the regulator a lot more confidence that the organisation understands what's going on. It's something I think they're pushing more and more towards, particularly under the, I think what they're using the framework is under the concept of data lineage. And also, with the full knowledge of this data landscape, it means that you've got the ability to understand and change it. Many organisations will have change programs running at the moment, and the ability for the programs to do an effective interlock through an enterprise design authority, through a good IT design authority, is very, very important. You've got a much better chance of success if you've got that visibility. Okay, so what we're going to do now is to show you what would be a fairly happy picture, which shows just a kind of very, very basic left to right flow of information that's being gathered and processed by an insurance organisation, all the way through to the external provision side, which is where you can be able to properly calculate the figures that you need to use for running your organisation at the top end, but also to speak to the regulator. So we can see on the left-hand side, we've got a kind of packaging presentation, and as we can see towards the bottom here, we've got the very many regulatory-driven aspects that need to be taken care of. There's KYC, KYB, anti-money laundering, FATCA, enhanced due diligence, and also this kind of CRM capability that needs to be built in order for that to be effective. One of the propositions we have is in that kind of client onboarding space. We have some partners who have got the ability to be able to expand the breadth of data that they can use and to do all these processes. And what it means is that they're able to do them much quicker. They're able to do them in a much better auditable fashion, and they're also able to do the re-rating clients again. And because also this is just done at the beginning, it's done throughout the life cycle. Elements within the MI space where all of the reporting that needs to be done, all the analytics that needs to be done, and there's a kind of lack of appreciation within the organization that is the data that's generated in the operational area that is used to be able to generate all the MI that's required. And ultimately that comes into the swim lane for external provision, where we need to start going out to the market and to the regulator and to the shareholders so they can understand what's going on. Okay, so if we look at those boxes in the swim lanes, what is possible to do across each of those activities is to then overlay, again, our conceptual data model, so we can understand what the types of data are that are used in each area. But what I wanted to show you now is something which is, that last picture that we showed you was what I suppose we could call it, Graham, is a kind of happy picture.
Indeed, yeah.
The next picture, and this is the one on the right-hand side that you can see now, is that's the reality. That's from a piece of work that we did within a larger FS organization when we were trying to understand the impact of the data governance and data management, the challenges that were being faced. When we mapped out the number of systems that were being used and the number of EUCs that were being used, we started on an A3 page, and the picture you can see on the right-hand side, of which you obviously cannot see any detail, that's actually a double A0. And it was a big surprise to us when we gathered this information, and it was a big surprise to the client as well. But it did show you accurately just how quickly, how big the landscape was and unknown, but also how much easier it was to manage the landscape once you had that view. Okay, so we look at some of the organizational challenges that we've got here. So as we know with many systems there, we have a huge amount of duplication of data. It's often of dubious quality. It has inconsistent definitions. It has inconsistent views of the data. We found in some of the work that we've done in the past, Graham, is that we've had to ban the use of data of terminology. So, for instance, in banking, we don't allow the use of the term accounts because it's totally different between an operational person, a credit risk person, and also a finance person. This lack of understanding of the data leads to a low confidence in the ability to be able to do automated reporting. And the reason for that is that we have an ever-increasing levels of manual remediation, and this is the work that's happening within the EUC. This EUC landscape that we have, because we have uncontrolled movements of data, we find that organizations are quite often running operational risks that they're not actually aware of, and if they're not aware of them, they can't manage them particularly well. But what this all has to come back to is that there is no clear view of who actually owns the data within the organization. Because we don't have the ownership, what we're finding is that the inability of the organization to understand and implement data governance means that we don't think about data until far too late in the life cycle for any change program. But what we also do is when we look at the data, is that we tend to think of the structured world. It's that IT systems and the EUCs. And what we're really not bringing appreciation is the richness of the unstructured data world that every organization has, but it's all locked away in documents, document repositories, in archives, which would all be very, very valuable, if it was joined together with a structured world to increase the quality of the data.
And we actually do have some quite smart tools in this space. So we've partnered with some organizations which have really quite good tools to enable you to quickly understand what your data landscape is, to collaboratively build up that picture so that you can then understand where that structured and unstructured data sits across your landscape and be able to build that view, which will then lead through to enabling you to use that data for kind of the big data advantages and the analysis that you can gain from that. So it's really good to be able to use some of these tools to enable you to do that in a much more effective and quickly manner. So.
It is, yes. I mean, some of the capabilities that are available now make very short work of being able to ingest the unstructured data world, being able to identify connections between data points within the organization, and also externally to reference data sets that can be used, particularly in that client onboarding area. And it can give you quite a different view of the world that you have at the moment. You know. So we do have two partners that we're working with quite closely who are able to provide that capability, and we would obviously look forward to the opportunity of displaying that to you, demonstrating that to you in a future engagement. So just to go back to the regulator concept at the moment, what Solvency II demands that you do is that you really do need to have a full end-to-end view of the data across the organization. It might be the view that this just supports what some people would call risk management, but what we have found is that it's actually it's covering all parts of the business, because in our experience we don't see any department within any organization which is totally disconnected from anybody else. There's that commonality that's there. The need to be able to understand the content of the data landscape. We need to build and develop a comprehensive data dictionary or taxonomy, and what we see in the Solvency II principles is very similar to what we see in the banking area. And we want to be able to, the client has obviously got to be able to do the ICA, the internal capital assessment, but also the ORSA, and be confident that the risk appetite they've got and the risk tolerance that they have defined within their strategy is actually being met.
Well, I think one of the important things in the Solvency II regulation is to have full data lineage, and that applies in banking as well. But really, every model that exists, you really have to understand all of the systems and the flows and the processing of that data from the source systems all the way through to the models, and that maps directly back to having a good view of the data landscape, and it's really kind of a critical aspect. I think another area is around data quality. You've got to ensure the data quality across all of those systems so that your models, reports, are accurate, and you can demonstrate that there is ongoing data quality assessment.
Yeah, that's true, and it's also recognition at the very senior levels within the organisation of the need for data governance. We do find in some organisations that this is viewed as something which is pushed for by the regulator. But what we're also finding is that organisations are more and more coming to the conclusion that it's actually a good idea. It's a common sense idea, because it actually helps them fulfil the business strategy. And there's a huge amount of savings to be made in the operational processing area. What we often find when we build these landscapes, Graham, is that we find multiples of the same things happening all over the place.
Well, a good example is client data. So often multiple client repositories, often conflicting data items. So that's always a key area, and trying to get that ultimate sort of single customer view not only gives benefits to the regulatory aspects, but also other benefits that you can have with really understanding your customer data well.
Yeah, that's true, and I think as we've had discussions in the past, and one of the questions that we can often ask when we go into an organisation is ask if they can point us towards the customer system, or they could point us towards the client system. And what we really find is that they can point you towards lots of systems that have got customer or client information on there, but you don't really have a one system that can give you, as you say, that single. Okay, so we've got a couple of questions coming through. Okay, I think the first one is, how can you coordinate this kind of activity across currently active work or change programs? Well, we do that with the data governance mechanism that we've developed, which puts data governance right into the center of the requirements definition, the requirements gathering, the requirements sign-off, but also the solutioning as well that we see in the IT world. And what we're able to do is to demonstrate the ability to do a very effective program interlock across multiple programs, whether they be mandatory or regulatory or the business change programs. And there is a view within the it's possible to build a view in there to show effectively what is happening and how programs are going to be working either across each other or they're going to be mutually beneficial. But it goes back to, I think, to our answer before, is that we need to start thinking about this just a little bit differently.
So we've got another question here from Colin. How do you prevent the information you gather about the data landscape becoming shelfware?
Fantastic question. It is, because I think the first couple of times we did this, there was very much a danger of it becoming shelfware. The answer to that, quite simply, is in using the landscape, both at the kind of logical and physical level, is that you then bring it into a governance mechanism. And from an IT point of view or a UC point of view, you can say, I have a very, very busy landscape, and I want to reduce that landscape, and therefore the landscape is going to come under governance. What we would be looking at within would be to identify duplicated capabilities, taking an enterprise architecture point of view. But I think there is always the danger of doing this as a one-off exercise, that if you do not use it to then build a set of governance processes on it, that it will become shelfware. So it's quite a kind of fundamental change in the way that you think.
Yeah, it has to form part of change management. So for every change request that goes through, which is going to impact upon the landscape, you have to make sure that you're updating and validating against your data landscape to make sure that it is staying current.
Okay, and we have another question now, which is,
so what do the tools actually do that we're talking about here? Does it map to sources of data or something else?
Well, we go beyond that, actually, because one of the interesting kind of views that we take of data is that we don't have a thing called source data. What we have is we have data which is used to drive and generate and run operational processes, which is then used for analytical and MI and reporting. So that's a kind of view I take of it. But we can map that all the way back to the reference data that we bring in from external agencies, where it appears in a particular platform and how it moves through the organization. One that we are particularly to work with is a tool set called Cluster 7, because that's something that can really draw out the full extent of the UC landscape, with its ability to interrogate spreadsheets and where they're linking together and where they're gathering their data from, what calculations they're doing, or literally down to the cell level. It's possible to quite a view of what the IT systems landscape is, normally from a CMDB or from an applications catalog, but you would also use things, for instance, like your batch scheduler, because that's where the standard interfaces that are running. And as you draw up the picture of the landscape, what you do is you prepare yourself to be able to do a deep dive. What we'd like to do when we exercise is to, rather than take the point of view that data needs to be perfect, we take the point of view that data just needs to be better. So we apply a kind of monetary value to the data that's on the platform itself. So for banking context, you may have a platform which has 20 billion pounds worth of credit on it, or in the insurance one, it could be 20 billion pounds worth of risks that are currently running. And then that allows us to give us some scoping and the ability to do that deep dive in there to understand what the data looks like and what data is being used. And do we have another question coming through? Can we do a demo of how this tool might work? In the next 5 minutes? No, I can't, but I'm sure we'll be able to do that, yeah.
So, yeah, more than happy to arrange demos of these tools. Please do send us a message and we will get something set up if you'd like that.
Yeah, and I think we're in a position at the moment where we're able to do quite quick proof of concepts, which don't necessarily mean that you have to purchase a license for the tool set. It's possible to do a relatively quick piece of work to generate the picture, to give yourself a much clearer view of what's going on, and then identify what additional work or next steps need to be done. And that can have quite a significant impact, particularly in that kind of program interlock area that we see in the kind of change world. But another thing I just want to draw out here, quite often we have an IT program which is attempting to deliver change, which is based on a set of requirements. What we're always finding is that somewhere in the business there needs to be the development of another EUC or another set of spreadsheets in order to take care of some of the analytics, the management information, and some of the reporting that needs to be done, which is something that cannot really be done particularly quickly within, for instance, the data warehouse world.
Okay, so I don't think there's any further questions coming through at the moment. If there is anything else, do post it onto the chat box.
I suppose if I was going to chuck in something else here, Graham, as something that we've seen, which is that using this way of thinking and using the capabilities that we have, what is possible to do is to have clients asking significantly different questions 2-3 months further down the line. You know, and again, that's a pointer towards that thinking about things in a slightly different way.
Okay, so there's not any more questions coming through, and I think time now we're coming to a close. So I think what we want to kind of end with is just a very quick overview of some of the 5 smart propositions that we've been discussing. And we're actually going to send out some slide material that gives some more information on these following the webinar. And with the partners that we have around kind of the client onboarding, the data landscape mapping, we're certainly very happy to provide any demos of these tools. Yes, please do let us know if you'd like that.
Yes, I think the pack that we've been using today will be distributed in PDF form, and we will be including the tool sets that we're alluding to here within them.
Okay, so I think we'll call it a close there. So I just want to say thank you very much for joining the session today. I do hope you found it useful and it's provided you with some good insights into data across the insurance sector. If you do have any further questions, then you can see our contact details on the slide there on the screen. Please do send us an email directly, and we will certainly respond to any questions that you have. In the meantime, it was great to meet you all on the webinar today, and look forward to meeting you again on future Xceed webinars. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much.
And good afternoon.
Good afternoon.